folks! Today's video is going to be another edition of my discontinued brand series where we deep dive into, as I've been doing, basically 3 different brands that are no longer with us for one reason or another, and talk about them in the context of when they were around, maybe at least look into the reasons why they've closed, or like theorize what could have been the reason. Just talking about brands that don't exist anymore. And I've done 2 of these videos in the past, so I will leave a link to that playlist above if you are curious to hear about any of the other brands I've talked about. OCC also says Dainty Doll. I'm trying to remember other ones. I don't remember off the top of my head. Today we're going to be talking about 3 more recent closures, like very recent closures actually. Clarisonic, which is the cleansing face brush, and Tati Beauty, which was very recent as of like last month I think when they announced it, and Becca Cosmetics, which was announced this last spring. I think they were like, we're closing our doors in September. So these are very recent closures, and I've saved some articles and saved some things about them, and let's just talk about it. Let's start with Clarisonic actually, because that is the oldest of the 3. And Clarisonic, I actually never owned one. I never owned a Clarisonic, so I don't have any experience personally with the brush. But Clarisonic gained a lot of popularity years ago, like right in like the heyday of like beauty YouTube getting really big and people investing in these big tools and these big expensive facial tools. And Clarisonic was like at the forefront of that. They adopted like the Sonicare model of like the Sonicare kind of vibrating brush thing. And so many people freaking on YouTube were like, oh, I got my Clarisonic Mia. It was like a thing that everybody had. And I remember that. And I was like, I don't need an expensive face brush. What the fuck? For years, they were like the face brush people. Like Clarisonic was the only guy in the game. And then you had a lot of competitors kind of creeping in. Like I know the probably biggest competitor is the Foria Luna, which is a more silicone based brush that is definitely more hygienic because it's not using actual bristles, it's a silicone brush. But back in, what year was it, when they were purchased by L'Oreal. The Clarisonic, like the company that made Clarisonic, was actually close to 20 years old when they closed this last year. And L'Oreal, I guess, purchased that company, which is called Pacific Bioscience Laboratories, which I guess is based out of like, oh no, the production facility is in Redmond. I was like, was it based out of Redmond? No. They started out with brushes that were like $150 to $230, which was very expensive, which was something that you would like invest in and maybe get a couple of like replacement brushes over the years, but like the tool itself was expensive. Eventually they did come out with cheaper ones that were like in the $100 range. I think that might have been the Clarisonic Mia that was the cheaper one. The one problem that I felt like with Clarisonic is that you bought this tool that was expensive, but then you still had to buy these replacement heads and these different attachments for it that were still very expensive, that were like $30 to $50, I think, each, which was that's quite expensive for a facial cleansing tool. Like that's really expensive for a face brush. But Clarisonic kind of like married with L'Oreal from the beginning back in like 2011. And I guess in 2016, L'Oreal switched production to like outsourcing. And I guess the production facility originally was in Redmond. So it was actually around Seattle, but they opted to like move to like external production and outsourcing production in 2016, which was definitely the year when like beauty YouTube reached its heyday. After that point, I think a lot of this kind of intense exfoliation stuff started to lose popularity, which I think is definitely why Clarisonic lost its like stranglehold on the market, because in the last several years you've had a lot more like skincare YouTubers kind of coming up, people like Catherine Hirons, more recently James Welsh, and you have a lot more dermatologists posting content online and sharing their information, and the kind of rise in cream cleansers and double cleanse and balm cleansers and things that are a lot less abrasive, and acid exfoliators. The Clarisonic was also very popular when you had like scrubs, like physical scrubs. As of dermatologists, like what they're saying, it's actually better for your skin to use stuff like acid exfoliators and to use a more gentle cleanser and to not be physically exfoliating your skin as often as what people were using their Clarisonics for. My sister had a Clarisonic for a while and she liked it, but she also like loved rubbing the shit out of her face. And then also, I think a lot more emphasis has been put on cleanliness as well. Stuff like this, the Foria Luna, which is a silicone brush, very easy to wash, like super easy to wash. When you have a Clarisonic, it's like brushing your face with a toothbrush, however often you use it, and you have to wash it all the time, and you still can't get those brushes super, super clean compared to like a silicone brush like the Foria Luna. And I haven't owned either of them, full disclosure. I've only ever used my hands and like washcloths to exfoliate my face for the most part. I do like using a nice gentle washcloth in the shower when my face is warm. Using like a balm cleanser with a washcloth, so satisfying to get everything off my face, and my face feels so soft afterwards. But Clarisonic, when did they close? So in this article on Beauty Independent, Clarisonic's marriage with L'Oreal was tricky from the beginning. For a conglomerate specializing in skincare, cosmetics, and hair care, electronics weren't familiar. It wasn't at the forefront of L'Oreal's like brand, you know, they weren't marketing electronics, they were marketing skincare. This was a tool for skincare, not necessarily an actual like skincare product. Since 2016, the sales of Clarisonics just went down because you had a lot more of those competitors. The cheaper competitors that were making similar products like the actual facial cleansing brushes, and then you had those more like silicone, more hygienic based brushes that gained a lot more popularity and were similar in price range. I believe a little bit cheaper than the Clarisonic, but still pretty expensive, but just overall more hygienic. And because you didn't have to buy all these replacement brushes, it was cheaper in the long run than the Clarisonic, which you had to buy replacement heads. There were different attachments. You could have a massage tool, which is like, to have all those attachments, it just seemed like it was really bulky and a lot of extra stuff that you ended up having to buy, and you're having to spend so much money on accessories for it that it just wasn't a sustainable thing for a lot of people. People were switching away from those brushes. Like, they just weren't buying the attachments anymore. They weren't as popular. And I think Clarisonic was definitely one of those brands that was directly affected by skincare YouTube, for sure. And I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing, because I think the kind of message that a lot of people were getting, at least when I was first making content and first watching content, people were exfoliating the crap out of their face. Like, they were using so many scrubs, they were using so many intense exfoliators that they probably weren't doing the best things for their skin. It was always a little bit frustrating too, at least like quick story from when I worked at Lush. There would be YouTubers who would mention Lush products, be like, oh, this cleaned up my acne. This was amazing for my acne, which like for them, sure, it worked just fine. But there was a girl that came in one time and she was like, oh, I saw Miss Glamorazzi use the mask of Magnaminty and said it cleaned up her acne. And I asked this girl about what her skincare needs were and kind of what her skincare concerns were and what was her normal skin type, you know? I don't necessarily like putting skins into types. I feel like it's very like pigeonholing in what products you end up using. But she was like, oh, it's sensitive and dry. And I'm like, but you want to use a clay minty mask with like pretty big chunks of adzuki beans, and I couldn't get her to try anything else. I couldn't get her to buy anything else, but because Miss Glamorazzi talked about it and said that it worked on her acne, she went out and bought it. And so I think the Clarisonic was probably similar to that, in that a lot of people were using it for their own problem skin, that you had a lot of young people going out and asking their parents for it and thinking that it was going to work for them all the time, when it doesn't work for everyone. Because a lot of times if you have sensitive skin, overly abrasive cleansers are not going to be the best thing for you, because it inflames and it irritates more than it helps. So Clarisonic, I never had one, but COVID. It was during COVID. That was kind of the final nail in the coffin, I think, for Clarisonic, because they tried to do all of these like sonic brushes and tried to be as innovative, but they just weren't catching up to the social media game the way that other brands were. Like, they weren't using social media effectively in the new age of social media. They were using it effectively back when they first came on the market, when you didn't have these big Instagram influencers and people on TikTok. You basically just had YouTube and beauty blogs. Clarisonic was really big then, but then when like the new school came in, they didn't grow up with the audience that needed to be their customers. That was that. Yeah, I guess, on September 30th. So this was actually super recent too. This was 2 months ago that Clarisonic closed. Yeah. And honestly, when they're owned by a big company like L'Oreal, and like 2 of the companies that I'm talking about today are owned by much larger companies, and that always is bad news if a company's not doing well, because usually the big conglomerates are looking at their bottom line, and if there's one thing at the bottom that isn't really bringing in much money, they're just gonna cut it loose. L'Oreal did that to Clarisonic, which, like, I'm not sad about. I never used it. Jesus Christ, I've been talking for 15 minutes. Fuck. Next, Tati Beauty. This was literally like a month ago when they announced this, and Tati Beauty was launched at possibly the worst time a makeup brand could launch. It was right around Dramageddon 2. It was just unfortunately timed for Tati. It was right around people's public opinion of her being all over the map. Their first product, she came out with a bang. Like, the first product, I didn't buy it, but I was like, I like the concept, and it was kind of cool. It was made by Seed Beauty, so it was like the same people that made Kylie Cosmetics as well as ColourPop. I remember seeing that and I was like, why is it so much more expensive then? But anyway, the concept was there and people liked it. I remember a lot of people getting it and people actually being really excited about it. Like, oh, this makes so much sense. And this was after she had done Halo and started Halo when people were a little bit confused. Because I remember when Tati launched Halo Beauty, I was like, I'm not buying a fucking vitamin from a makeup YouTuber. Sorry, not doing that. Eyeshadow palettes make perfect sense. Vitamins, no. So Tati Beauty actually realistically could have gone well, but the next product that came out after the eyeshadow palette was like a makeup application tool, like a sponge. And I just remember being very confused. In a similar way, I was confused when Patrick Starr's first stuff was like makeup remover. I'm like, what? Why are we starting a brand with like very specific niche things that are not connected to any, I don't know. It was just very weird. The product itself wasn't really received very well because people were like, A, what the hell is this? B, do you have to wash it? Like, there was just a lot of kind of mixed messaging and mixed marketing around the sponges. And they were pretty expensive for what they were too, which I'm like, again, sponges shouldn't be that expensive. But besides Dramageddon 2, which wasn't even the biggest part of, I think, why Tati Beauty died. COVID happened, obviously, and as we found out several months ago, basically very quickly, it sounds like, in the 2-year history of Tati Beauty, they were going through major litigation with their co-owner. I'm not even gonna dig into that so much because there's so much that goes into it and it's so complicated, and I know diddly squat about legal proceedings and stuff like that. I have no fucking clue. But basically, it sounds like their co-founder, Tati and her husband, as one party, and then their co-founder said that they were like defrauding him and he was taking them to court. Like, just a lot of stuff was going down. It was getting very messy. They like moved from Los Angeles. They moved back up here. Like, I remember I did watch the video when Tati came back. I'm like, I'm just curious what she's gonna say. Like, I'm just curious. Like, she came back up to Seattle and I knew she was from here originally, but there was just a lot of stuff happening all at the same time. It was like Dramageddon 2. So the public opinion of her was all over the fucking map. COVID happened, so production was not easy. It was more difficult. She took an entire year off of YouTube, like completely, like just wasn't making content. So you didn't have that audience that you were interacting with on a regular basis. So it wouldn't have really made sense to come out with products when you weren't making content. And then all the legal stuff. So all of that put together was just a clusterfuck from the beginning. I don't really care one way or another if the brand was successful or not. And like, I'm not somebody who follows her usually. I was only just interested in what she was gonna say when she came back because I'm like, it's been a while. And she like kind of blew up the internet when it came to the whole drama. It was a lot happening. It was a lot. As far as her brand, I feel like it was just another kind of brand in the sea of influencer brands that, you know, they didn't come out with a bang. They didn't start out the way that a lot of other brands have done or like stuck with it or like kept any sort of consistency. That was the thing. And I think that's what makes a lot of influencer brands really successful, is if there is that consistency in releases, in products, everything makes sense as a collection, everything's cohesive, things make sense together. But I don't think Tati Beauty really had that going for them because the first product was so kind of vague. And then the second product was a sponge, which was like, ma'am, there wasn't anything cooler you could have come up with. Like, you've been a beauty YouTuber for how long?
And a sponge.
Yeah, Tati Beauty was based on the timing, it was kind of doomed from the beginning, to be honest. They come and they go. They come and they go.
Next.
Last but not least, Becca. So Becca Cosmetics is a brand that I've been using for a long time. I remember buying the Moonstone highlighter liquid. It was like a pump tube years ago. And this was when I first was living in the city. So this was like 6-7 years ago now. I loved it. I mixed it with my foundation. I wore it. It was great. I remember hearing about Becca first from Australian YouTubers because they're an Australian-based brand. And then they came to the US. And they really got in on the ground floor with influencer marketing and branded partnerships really well and really quickly. As many people know, Champagne Pop from Jaclyn Hill, one of the most successful influencer collaborations of all time, I would say, because they still have the fucking color and it's like 5-6 years later, okay? That's successful. Whether or not you like Jaclyn Hill, that was a good highlighter, and you know it, okay? I'm the first person to criticize Jaclyn Hill for a multitude of things, but I even bought that highlighter, and I loved it. Granted, I didn't really know anything about her at the time when I did buy it, so would I buy it now with all the things I know about her? Probably not, but, you know. It was super successful, and Becca was one of those brands that were really doing highlighters really well. They had a good range of highlighters. That was the other thing that I think Becca did really well, in that they had like the lightest of the light going down to a really pretty like bronze shade that worked for a ton of different skin tones. You didn't have just these like 2 different colors. You didn't have like a cool tone and a warm tone. You had a white, and then you had a pearlescent, and you had like a gold, and then a rose gold, and then another rose gold, and then a bronze, and like you had all of these colors that people could pick from. And they're good highlighters. Like, they're good highlighters. Like, I still have a subscriber bought me Moonstone earlier this year and sent it to me in my P.O. box. I'm like, wow, thank you. You didn't have to do that, but thank you. The formula was really good. Like, the formula was really good. People were using it online. They loved it. A lot of different YouTubers besides Jaclyn Hill loved it. And they really had, like, a hold on that. And then they had their under eye corrector, which was also very popular. And there was a few other products over the years that got pretty popular. There was like a primer, and then their bronzers. I actually almost bought their bronzers once. And then they had blushes, bunch of different highlighters that were limited edition. Over the years, they've had some questionable collabs besides Jaclyn Hill that were just really kind of out of the blue and weird. They did like 2 collabs with Chrissy Teigen that like weren't that good. They did a collab with like Khloe Kardashian and her friend or something. It was just kind of weird choices for collabs with people. And not to say that like you need to make good, like have good collabs for a brand to last, because there's a plenty of brands that don't really do collabs and they're just fine. But Becca made some weird choices, and they never really innovated beyond those initial successful products. And when you're not putting out things that are like foundation or complexion stuff that are like staple products that people need to buy over and over and over again, you're not going to have the same kind of sustainability if really what you're known for is like highlighters and under eye correctors, because people aren't buying highlighters. Well, regular consumers aren't buying like a ton of highlighters and repurchasing a ton of highlighters. So rather than like a company like, say, Bare Minerals, which is mostly known for their complexion stuff, people need to buy foundation. People need to buy primer and concealer and powder. So people go repurchase that stuff. They go back for it. So with Becca, having their most popular products be things that you maybe bought once or twice, it wasn't a long-term thing that I think was really going to last much longer than it did. And they did also cite COVID as one of the reasons why they decided to close in September. That makes sense. Like a lot of brands, like COVID just, it hit the market. It hit consumerism and capitalism hard. And, you know, those are the least of the worries that I had about COVID. It was like, oh no, it's hurting corporations, boo-hoo. But I think the other thing that made Becca lose some of its luster, I guess, is when it was purchased by Estee Lauder. And Estee Lauder is kind of out of touch with a lot of things, and you had this growing population of people wanting to support brands that didn't test on animals and didn't have any sort of like animal testing. It was all cruelty free, and Estee Lauder and L'Oreal still have that. And so you had a lot of people not wanting to support the like underling brands of those, even if like Becca itself didn't test on animals, they were still owned by Estee Lauder. Estee Lauder's never really been known for like being really good at social media. Like the Estee Edit is a perfect example. I might go into that in another video, but I didn't have as much interest or intrigue in it currently, but Estee Lauder's never really been that good at it. Like, they were really good at the very beginning of beauty YouTube because people were using Estee Lauder Double Wear. But that was all word of mouth. That had nothing to do with Estee Lauder. That just had to do with what people were using and the lack of competition on the market for full coverage foundations. So you had people using Estee Lauder Double Wear and MAC foundations, and that was it. That was it for full coverage. And with Becca being owned by this bigger company, I think probably created a lot more hurdles for them to jump over and bureaucracy to work through. And after the Jaclyn Hill highlighter, they didn't do anything as big and as exciting as that since. Like, they were never able to capture that magic again. So they closed in September. And that one I was actually kind of sad about because I like those highlighters and I was like, damn. But the weirdest part of the Becca saga is that Smashbox, which is another Estee Lauder owned company, which makes sense because I'm like, wait, how did Smashbox? Smashbox is basically like saving the highlighters and the under eye corrector. So now those products are going to be sold under Smashbox, but it's going to be like Smashbox X Becca. So there's supposedly going to still be the same products, but they're going to be sold under Smashbox, because I'm assuming Estee Lauder still saw value in those two products, those two lines, the corrector and the highlighters. And they were like, well, we can still make money off this, so let's just like tack it underneath another of our brands, which just feels so weird, especially because they announced it after people probably went out and bought like, you know, backups of their favorite highlighter. So you had people like who had already bought it and they're like, wait, it's not actually gone? I didn't have to do that? Fuck. Like, I just thought that was so weird when I saw that. I was like, Becca may be going out of business. This is on Allure. Becca may be going out of business, but the under eye brightening corrector and shimmering skin perfector pressed highlighter will live on with another classic makeup brand. So 7 months. So this was, when was the story posted? Yeah, so in September. Oh yes, yeah. It's been 7 months since makeup lovers were devastated by the news that Becca, arguably a vertebra in the backbone of the beauty industry, would be going out of business. So they gave them a lot of time. Some of our all-time, yeah, whatever, blah, blah, blah. But in an unforeseen plot twist, another long-loved makeup brand is swooping in to save the day, or more specifically, to save a couple of products. Instead of letting the world become a slightly less radiant place, oh no, what flowery language, Smashbox has announced that it has adopted 2 of Becca's most popular products. It'll be just permanent additions to Smashbox, which seems so bizarre. That's the first time I've ever seen that at all. That's so weird, and it's the weirdest thing. I was like, wait, what? It was kind of like when Fox canceled Brooklyn Nine-Nine, and then was it ABC or NBC that like went and picked it up? Or like when The Killing got canceled by like FX and then Netflix picked it back up. At least with TV shows, it makes a little bit of sense. But like with makeup brands, it's like, this is a Becca product, but it's under Smashbox. It's like, what? It's so weird. They can do that? They can just do that? But knowing that they're both owned by Estee Lauder makes a bit more sense, because Estee Lauder, in the long run, it's their bottom line and they can do whatever the fuck they want. But yeah, I just thought that was so odd and silly to see that, oh, well, Becca's leaving, but not these 2 products, which were like really the only thing that I think a lot of people still liked. So it was just like, why not just reinvent the brand? I mean, if you were gonna, I don't know. It was just like they cut their losses and like, let's keep these 2 products and just put it over there. Let's just move it to a different shelf. Like, it was very bizarre and very surprising. It was a very surprising thing to see on my timeline. I was like, wait, what? Like, is that a real headline? But yeah, and that's basically the newest update to that saga, is that the 2 most popular products from Becca are the only things that still live on, but under Smashbox. No clue. I haven't been into a Sephora in a while. Those were the 3 brands I wanted to talk about today that have been discontinued in some way or another, for some reason or another. Like I said before, the playlist will be linked up in a card above my head and in a link down in the description. So if you want to check out any of the other videos I've talked about discontinued brands with, those are there, so you can check them out. And if you have any other ideas for future versions, iterations of this video, let me know in the comments down below, because I do like doing this. This is fascinating for me, especially kind of digging into ones that ended a while ago versus recently. These were all very recent, as in like the last 6 months. For today's song of the day, let's see. Today's song of the day is Me and My Dog by Boygenius, and there's no particular reason why. I was just listening to playlists the other day and I was like, oh fuck, I really like this song, man. And Boygenius is Phoebe Bridgers, Lucy Dacus, and Julian Baker, but they're beautiful and wonderful, and I've never seen them play live. I've seen Phoebe play live, but this song makes me sad. So like, if you don't want to feel sad, maybe don't listen to this because it's sad, but I'll leave that in the description down below as well. I hope you all had a good week. It's Friday. We made it. Please go get hydrated. Grab a drink of water. I hope you're staying well rested. I hope you are staying healthy and happy and hydrated. If you would like to check out any of my other social media, my Instagram, my Twitter, or my Twitch, Instagram and Twitter are both Abers07, and then my Twitch is Abers without the 07. We are still playing Sims, but there will be probably some Halo coming up because it's out now, Josh will have me play it at some point. Like the whole game is out, so. Thanks so much for watching, everyone. I hope you have a good weekend, and I will see you all on Monday. Bye!